Right, so I know what you're thinking. I'm not a driver coach, I'm just some YouTuber, but I'm relatively quick, and a lot of people often message me after to see a stream and they say like, how do you stay consistent, how do you chat while driving, stuff like that. Today I'm going to share with you some of the basic tips that I've learned over my last 20 years of sim racing, and hopefully they'll help you to just become a faster, more consistent driver, and someday, most likely, you'll probably beat me on track. Let's do it. First and foremost, and most importantly, is the brake. You want to be able to brake consistently and quickly, but knowing when to brake and how to brake is super important. I've often said that brakes are the most important piece of sim racing hardware, but you need to realize that there's a time and a place to brake in a certain way. What you want to do is when you're going very, very fast, you can pretty much guarantee that slamming on your brakes isn't going to lock up when you're going your absolute fastest at the end of a straight. However, when you're mid-corner, you slam the brakes in exactly the same way, you're very likely to lock up. The thing is, when you're going faster, it's harder to lock up those wheels. So as you go slower through those corners, you need to be a lot more delicate with the brake. Now it gets even more complicated than that, and there are far better coaches out there. But you need to learn about a thing called trail braking. For those of you who don't know what trail braking is really just a way of using the brake to balance the weight distribution of the car so that you can do exactly what you need to do. For instance, sometimes if you need a bit of load on the front wheels just to get traction going through a corner or in a front wheel drive car or whatever, you want to slightly adjust that brake. You don't want to do any major motions where you leave off the brake or slam the brake, because that's going to unsettle you in a corner and ultimately you're going to understeer or wash wide or whatever. So learning that balance of your brake is really, really important. You'll actually even see some drivers braking while they're on the throttle, which seems completely counterintuitive. I'm not going to go into the details of it here right now, and if any of you have ever been karting, you've probably been given out shit to for doing that, because they know. You're not supposed to press the two of them at the same time. Newsflash, real racing drivers do it all the time. I'm not saying that that's going to make you faster, but in certain situations, it does help. And the second thing I want to talk to you about is traction. Traction is really, really important. Obviously setup and all that comes into it. You need to know about your traction, but more than anything, you need to understand how your car is behaving, how the surface is behaving, what your grip levels are, stuff like that. The only way to do that is make really subtle adjustments. Don't do anything stupid mid-corner like pull on the steering wheel or slam the brakes or even slam the throttle. You want to be very gentle with your inputs, because smooth is fast. The second you lose traction, you're not only, most likely if you're losing traction, it's going to be when you're pressing the accelerator going out of a corner or braking going into that corner. If you're braking into a corner, you lock up, you mess up your line, and you open the door for somebody else because you're just going slower. When you're coming out of a corner, if you're losing traction, if you oversteer or understeer or whatever, again, you're not just losing time right there, you're losing time for the rest of the straight coming up. So it's a huge thing, keep the traction. If sometimes that means you have to give half throttle, quarter throttle, 3/4 throttle, doesn't matter. If you're not braking traction, you are automatically faster. In any car, any situation, don't brake traction. Of course, that doesn't always hold true. Sometimes a lack of traction actually makes you slightly quicker. Not in most cases though. In some cases you have a car which is maybe very, very difficult to point in a certain direction, or it's a very high aero setup and it's not very agile. A little bit of a slide on braking or accelerating out of a corner actually can help point you in the right direction, but after that all the same principles apply. It does get complicated, don't worry about that. The only reason I just said this part is so that people don't spam in the comments saying, well actually sometimes it's quicker to lose traction, blah blah blah. Next up, concentrate on your lines. Your racing lines are really, really important. Traditionally, when there's a corner, we're taught to just go for the apex of that corner and that's it. But what's after the corner is as important as the corner itself. A general rule of thumb that I use, if there's a long straight after the corner, you want to take a wide approach and you want to get on that throttle as early as possible. You want to make that straight as long as possible. One of the negatives of that is obviously you leave the door open for somebody to tuck in on the inside, so your lines might clash, so you need to be aware of that. But you want to make that straight as long as possible. If you have 2 corners in quick succession, you want to carry as much speed in, and it doesn't matter if at the end of the first corner you're still losing speed, because your next corner is slow anyway. So you apply the principle of getting the good exit out of the next corner. So it all depends, but you need to learn those racing lines. Don't just go by you know, what you feel is the quickest. Look at other people's data, look at real life footage from that track. See how people are actually taking the lines, and ultimately the racing line is going to be something that should come very, very naturally to you. If the racing line doesn't come naturally to you, none of the other stuff in this video matters. You need to learn how to make that racing line very, very natural. The easiest way to do that, start learning racing lines. You'll start understanding why this is quicker, why that's quicker. Bear in mind that not all racing lines suit all driving styles. Some drivers do have that more, I guess, square way of approaching corners where they take that wide approach. Others carry lots and lots of speed and you know, balance that fine line of traction, and that's very successful for them. So there are plenty of great videos out there on different driving styles, but in general, trust your ability to find the racing line, and you will automatically start applying all of these principles that I'm actually talking about. My second last point is going to be to race your own lines. One of the biggest mistakes that I see in online racing is that the super fast people actually don't end up anywhere in the race. They rage quit, they crash out, they pit for repairs, they end up messing up other people's races because they're not racing their own lines. They're amazing at quali, they're amazing at practice, they race and they crash, or they race and they get nervous, or whatever. You need to apply your own knowledge, your own, you have to have some faith in your ability to race those lines. Don't worry about what the car in front of you is doing. If anything, you want to be doing something differently to what they're doing. If you're doing something on your own when you're in quali to be as fast as you can, you should most likely be doing that when there are cars in front of you as well, even if they're doing something completely differently. Remember, if you're copying what they're doing, you're actually not faster than them. You're just trying to do what they're doing, but better, and that doesn't really make sense. Similarly, car behind you, I know we all get rear-ended every now and then. I should rephrase that. I know we all get bumped by cars every now and then, but ultimately it's their responsibility, and we need to have a certain amount of trust in other people and in other people's driving ability. In Assetto Corsa, things like your car radar really help, but in general, just observation on your mirrors, you can kind of see how quickly cars are approaching you. It is ultimately their responsibility, but if you see a car that's going to dive bomb you or whatever, just keep that wide line, let them dive bomb past you and tuck up the inside. Don't use a car behind you as an excuse for losing a race. I know that's very, very easy to say, and we've all been hit by cars and we've all been taken out, but ultimately everybody's there for the same reason. Everybody's there to race, and a car will not intentionally hit you from behind. So keep that in mind. Really, really important. Race your own race. Don't race the race of the car behind. If there is a faster car behind, and again, you probably won't hear a lot of driver coaches saying this. I'm not a driver's coach, so I'm allowed to say this. If there's a faster car behind you and they're making you nervous, let them past. Even better, let them pass and try and do what they're doing. Try and race their lines. Try and learn. Try and be quicker. And your ultimate end goal, pass them out again. Learn so much in the 1 or 2 laps that you're behind them that you become better than them again. Or you realize, oh my God, this corner, I'm taking it completely wrong. That's how you should do it. That's where my 3 or 4 tenths that I'm losing every lap, that's where it's all coming from. And race the rest of that race with that mindset. You've just learned, you've allowed yourself to learn. So rather than racing the person behind you who's obviously faster, you've actually just learned from them and become a better driver on the fly in the middle of a race. And last but not least, setup. Obviously, setup is important, but the fundamental rule of setup, and this may be a little bit anticlimactic for some of you watching, setups will only make fast drivers even faster. They will never, ever, ever make a slow driver fast. It's just not happening. It's not possible. Setups differ for everybody. For some people, fixed racing setup is the be-all and end-all. Other people want to be able to adjust their little bits and pieces. Ultimately, if someone's way, way quicker than you, they're going to beat you with a stock setup, regardless of how good your setup is, 9 out of 10 times. Become that person who can drive a stock setup and be competitive, then learn to do setups and make your setup better. Now, obviously, things like gearing are quite important, very important. Tire pressures, very, very important. Learn about your tire pressures, your gearing, and basic aero. They're the three main things that you need in order to be somewhat competitive. The other stuff will come to you, especially as you find that you're doing your best, you're not making mistakes, you're catching those other people, they just have an edge, they've got more grip or whatever. That's when setup becomes more important. Setup is not going to make a slow driver fast. End of. That's why I left it to last. Don't worry about it. If you've forgotten what all the other stuff is, go rewatch that, because that stuff is really, really important. I apply it every time I race. It's the reason I don't get into as many accidents as many people do. It's the reason I finish relatively strongly, and it's the reason people after a race, they message me. How do you stay consistent? How do you do this? How come you're quick? So there you have it, Lawrence's complete guide to how to be an absolutely amazing, incredible, fastest driver in the world, winning everything type of driver. Seriously though, they are the basic principles of what I think makes a quick driver. I'm not a driver coach. I do recommend some driver coaches though. You've got Coach Dave's Academy, you've got Driver 61. They're two drivers that I have massive respect for. They communicate what they're feeling and how you should drive extremely well. They offer tons and tons of free content, and if you really are taking this seriously, if you want to compete for silverware, and if you're just on the edge, go to them for sure. You will learn so much more from them, but all of what they're saying is very much based on the principles that I've just outlined. But they know the ins and outs of, if your balance isn't shifting properly when you're braking, adjust this. If you're doing this, adjust that. If you're doing that, think about this. You know, all the different exercises, all the different things you need to be thinking about and the frame of mind you need to be in for racing. That's stuff that they cover. Most sim racers don't need that. Finally, very finally, I'm known for my long outros, but finally, the ultimate point that I will reiterate is drive your own race and don't let others around you distract you. Most of the time, faster drivers will finish behind you if you make less mistakes than they do. Very, very important. Do remember it. I'm Lawrence. Thanks for watching the channel. Please hit subscribe, all that kind of stuff. 75% of you people watching right now are not subscribed. Please subscribe. When we hit 5,000 subscribers, I'm giving away a massive prize. I'll be giving away one of these Race Logic Lap Delta timers and a complete sim pack. That is a pack that you can just hook up to your sim rig. You can also hook that up to a real race car, compare your lap times, all that kind of stuff. Really, really cool piece of kit, extremely professional, worth a lot of money. That's worth €1,500. So when I reach 5,000 subscribers, one of you is actually going to win that, which is very, very cool, and massive thanks to VBox for supplying that prize for the channel. I'm Lawrence, thanks a million for watching. I'll chat to you later.